All right, so we're streaming on YouTube. Are you sending it to Tyler?
I am. I'm going to, once it pulls up here for me, it takes a minute to load up.
I really need a haircut.
I've been cutting my own hair and it is awesome. I'm glad I wear a hat. I'm glad I'm a hat guy.
I mean, look, it's over my ears. Look at this.
Yeah, my hair's a mess, but you know, I don't ever see anybody, and so who cares?
I did have a dude who just kept driving by my house during the show today yelling that I had to go inside.
Okay, gotcha. All right, now we're gonna send this to Tyler. I just want to make sure we were running.
This is a very special edition of the Mitch Please Book Club, since we are talking about abortion.
Yeah, this is going to be a no joke zone, I think.
I went to Jones and Beth. They did not have our book.
Why is that?
No.
Huh?
I didn't ask because I was worried I'd get upset. So somebody called and they said that they don't like waiting on their shipment, which is hard for me to believe. Like, it's been 2 months, and you know, thinking, why isn't it there yet?
Yeah, that sounds. I mean, everything else is still shipping.
But you would think, I will say, like their magazine section was empty. They had no magazines.
Yeah.
But I still would feel like they should have. Like, I mean, don't you want to sell a book? I mean, I can't imagine there are that many books at Joseph Beth that would sell more than that one.
Yeah. I thought we had some sort of plan for them to, you know.
We were supposed to do a thing there.
Yeah.
That was going to be my signing. That was going to be our signing. Was the first one was going to be at Joseph Beth.
At Lexington and Louisville, right?
Well, they don't have a Louisville. It was going to be
Carmichael's at Louisville.
It was going to be Barnes and Noble in Louisville.
Oh.
Carmichael's has done a pretty good job promoting it. They do stuff with it all the time.
There's also Joseph Beth up here.
Yeah, it's like, do you want to?
I thought that, yeah, that's very interesting to me. I would have thought.
I also think when it's displayed, there's going to be a whole set of people who maybe don't listen to me on a daily basis, though, who probably have heard of it that will potentially buy it. You know, I mean, I very rarely go to a bookstore with the goal of buying a particular book.
Did you see any other fairly new books? That's the question.
The book I always look to compare to is that book, The Oral History of the Office, because it came out the same day. And they had that. So that's what made me skeptical. It's like, why do you have that? I know that came out the exact same day.
Yeah, so you got a shipment of books.
I did not see Alicia Keys' book, I will say, which we beat. We didn't beat it on the New York Times, but we actually sold more copies than Alicia Keys.
Did you walk past the Jessica Simpson book stand and just tip it over, just push it over?
You did really well. But apparently this is not for public consumption. But we have
wait, hold on. You're live on YouTube.
Whatever. We still have sold more copies than Alicia Keys. Which I don't know what that says for Alicia Keys.
She's gonna be so mad when she finds out.
She probably has her own book club tonight, and they're trying to figure out how to go. Well, all right. Thank you all very much for joining us here for Chapter 9. We have just 2 more chapters. We're going to do Chapter 10. And then I don't know if we'll do like a wrap-up show. We'll see, but we'll definitely do Chapter 10 early next week.
Best of.
What?
We'll do a best of. Best of the counties.
The same as the Michael Jordan documentary, 10 parts. And each of them is a little more special than the other. All right, so Chapter 9, we went to what I would call South Central Kentucky. Basically, we went to the zone that is collectively probably the most conservative voting part of the state. It's Southern Kentucky. A lot of this area was Republican even when the rest of the state was Democrat. And it is the area that, like, as we researched, per capita has the most churchgoers. More percentage of people go to church in this part of the state than almost anywhere in the United States. So it was, and because it's so Republican, Mitch has won this area by a lot. The idea was I wanted to go here towards the end to sort of say, okay, Matt, here's your dose of realism. Even though you think you could win, here's how hard it's going to be, Chris.
Yeah, this area to me exists outside of Bowling Green. This area is mainly to me places I drive through on my way to the SEC tournament, right? Because it is right down that corridor, right? So,
it's on the way to the SEC tournament.
Yeah, that's right. These are the on the way to the SEC tournament counties. I mean, I'd spent some time in Bowling Green, but I mean, I was not that familiar with a lot of these counties off of the interstate, I guess it were.
There's probably 3 or 4 of these counties I'd almost never been to, and we'll talk about them as we go. So we start in Warren County. That's Bowling Green. And, Chris, we've gotten almost universal positive feedback. I guess that's good. I mean, I guess people who don't like your book don't just write you and go, I hate you. Yeah. Actually, that happens to me all the time, but not about the book. But the one thing that people seem kind of mad is that we made fun of people who drove Corvettes. And so the Corvette Museum is there. And Chris, a little backstory, Chris wrote a long diatribe about people who drive Corvettes. It was like 2 paragraphs and it was brutal. It was mean, but it was really funny.
It was like a Foxworthy bit.
Yeah, I thought it was really funny. And so we put it in our first draft. And when we got it back from the editors, it got a big X through all of it. And Ummer even wrote, why would you want to do this? That was his exact thing. So I decided to take the 2 paragraphs and make it into 1 paragraph. Ummer wanted to cut it again, but I thought it was good enough that I wanted to leave it, and I did for you, Chris Tomlin.
Yeah, I appreciated that. And honestly, it surprised me that infuriated readers because I don't really see a lot of people just tool around in their Corvette, coming home and sitting down and just popping open this book. But it is true that when you think of Corvettes, in mass. You think of 2 things, Bowling Green and your 4th of July parade, where there's like a strip of like
I think the kind of person that really likes their Corvette doesn't want to be mocked about it. And I think that was your thing. So we went to the Corvette Museum, and this was one of those places that I didn't really know what we were going to write about. And we found this wall of donors. And I still am baffled by the fact that there are people who have donated more than $1 million to the Corvette Museum. And the woman said to us, well, it's a recognized charity, which that's a very loose idea of charity, of museum dedicated to a for-profit car company, but apparently it is. And I have to tell you, as I put in the book, the kind of person that's like, I got $1 million to donate to something. I guess I could do hospitals, maybe universities, maybe food organizations. No, I got it. The Corvette Museum. I just don't know who those people are, although I did read that there were at least 160 people that had given at least $25,000.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like a weird competition to want to win, which is the richest guy who loves Corvettes the most.
And I would be embarrassed to have my name on there. Like, if
I would be like, you know what? You leave it
anonymous. Yeah. Like, okay, so like for instance, I like wrestling. Okay. And if the WWE Museum convinced me to donate $25,000, I would go, just leave my name off. Like, I don't want people to know that I gave the Macho Man statue $25,000. But these people were not scared of it.
Yeah, it's like when your kid's school says, we want you to buy a brick to pave in front of it, and it's $15 and we'll get your name on it. Only it's not a brick, it's a plaque. Instead of $15, it's $1 million. And instead of your kid's school, it's National Corvette.
It's a car. So, but we used it as a chance to talk about Mitch McConnell and money. And I have to say, if you really want to, in my opinion, if you were to sort of look at everything that Mitch McConnell has done as in his time in office, if you were to ask me, what is the one thing he's had the most significant impact on? I think I would say the campaign finance system. because for decades, it was assumed that it was legal to limit the amount of money in politics. And we did it a variety of ways, and you could research it. I won't go into it. But really, since the Great Depression, we have limited money in politics, and everybody just assumed that was okay. And Mitch McConnell has made it his life's mission to try to make it to where there are no barriers to spending as much money as you want on politics. And he hasn't done it completely, but he's come pretty close, to be honest with you. And it's very telling about him that he said the day that they passed McCain-Feingold, the campaign finance reform, he was quoted as saying it was the worst day of his political life. And I will note that was after 9/11 had happened.
Yeah.
Which is an unbelievable thing to say that was worse. But for McConnell, it kind of was, because McConnell knew that if you could make it to where people can kind of donate as much as they want, all you really have to do is cultivate a few wealthy individuals as your supporters, and you don't have to do what the general public wants. Mm-hmm. And guess what? That's what they do. And it's not just Republicans, Democrats do it too. Basically, as long as you keep your big donors happy, you don't have to worry about what Joe Public thinks. And that's all Mitch McConnell. And it was fascinating to go back and read, Chris, when John McCain threw the mic down on McConnell. Yeah. And McConnell was like being all indignant. And he said, "How dare you say that money corrupts us? Give me an example of when we have been corrupted by money." And McCain just looks at him and goes, "Well, I remember a senator coming in and telling me if I voted for the tobacco bill, I'd get millions of dollars in campaign contributions." And then he just looked at McConnell, because he knew it was McConnell. He didn't mention his name, but he knew it was him. And McConnell shut up. There was nothing he could say. Yeah. What a great moment. What a great moment. I wish Twitter. Can you imagine if that happened right now?
Yeah. Well, McCain has had a couple of those moments. Had a couple of those moments. But yeah. Is this as close as we got in this book to saying this is something McConnell cares about? I mean, really, because
even with this, he's flipped his position from when he started. Because when he was a county judge executive, he was for campaign finance limits.
Yeah.
But I think what he realized, I think two things happened. One, Republicans used to be for campaign finance limits because unions were the best generators of political money. Unions would use their dues to donate for candidates. So Democrats were much better at raising money than Republicans. As unions went down, however, Republicans became the best. And I think once he realized it was better for Republicans, he flipped his position.
Yeah.
And then the second thing that I think happened is when he married Elaine Chao, because Elaine Chao's rich and her family's rich. And he went from a politician that was kind of like everybody else to a really wealthy politician. And he had the doors open to money at massive amounts. And all of a sudden, he's like, why am I dealing with Joe Public in Warren County when I can just go see a Chinese billionaire and get all the money I need?
Yeah, it's kind of the moment, right, where he figured out the power of money, right?
Yeah, because he had it for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you and I have never had any money. So it's like, what are we worried about?
Right. I mean, it definitely is something that, like, I feel like it's also something he's very good at. He's very good at it.
He's great. I mean,
he's nobody better.
And he has changed through the Supreme Court. He has changed America and made it worse. Money has a greater impact on politics now than at any time since prior to the Great Depression.
Now, which came first? Did he decide he wanted did he decide he wanted to take on this argument because he realized he was good at raising money, or did he take on this argument because he wanted to get better to raise more money?
I think he did it because he realized that it could be an advantage for Republicans.
Yeah.
Again, when Democrats were better at raising money, which was in the 80s, when unions were still big, he was for campaign finance reform. Mm-hmm. The moment unions stopped being as big, then all of a sudden he wants to raise all the money because Republicans are better at it. Yeah. So to me, now what's interesting is it's changing again, because thanks to the internet, Democrats are better at small dollar donations. So Democrats have found a way, Bernie was the big one at this, to incentivize lots of people to give $20.
Nickel and dime it. Yeah.
And by the way, Trump's good at this too. Mitch is actually terrible at this. So what's interesting is Bernie, Trump, and Obama are very good at small dollar donations. Whereas old school politicians like Hillary, like McConnell, like Biden aren't as good at it. It's weird. It's almost like the politicians of the future will be able to do it, but the politicians of a generation past really aren't very good at it. So let's use Kentucky. Amy McGrath's very good at it. Amy McGrath is very good at raising small amounts of money. Mitch McConnell isn't. And so for the first time in his career, he's being outraised by her because she is good at what's bigger now.
It's also a very fitting allegory because it proves that people, like actual individuals, don't have strong feelings about Mitch McConnell, right? Like regular people, which is something we learned on this trip, which is—
They don't love him. They don't love him. They don't feel the need to give him money. That's true.
Yeah, like the regular Joe isn't going to be like, you know what, I'm going to send him $20, you know, but millionaires give him all kinds of money.
People would say to me when I was considering, Matt, you'll be really good at raising small amounts of money. And I have to tell you, I don't know how I would have been at raising money because I don't like to ask people for money. Matter of fact, I think of all the qualities you need to be a successful politician, I think fundraising would have been my worst. Like, I just don't think I'd have been good at it. I don't like to ask people for things. You know, if somebody asked me, you know, I've told you the story, I won't say who it is, but there was a donor who was asking, I was talking to them, pretty famous donor, and they were like, you know, now Matt, if I donate to you, I presume if I needed to talk to you as a senator, I would be able to do so. And I said, well, yeah, I mean, the same amount any of my other constituents would. And they were almost shocked by that answer. But you know what? That was actually the truth. I'm not going to take, I don't take call. Who wants to listen to people just because they gave you money, think they own you? Like, I couldn't do that.
But it makes you wonder who has asked Mitch McConnell that question and what that answer was.
Well, I think he's fine listening to it.
Yeah.
I think he's fine with it.
Right.
We go to Allen County, and Chris, when we found out that in Allen County there was a shopping center that had been owned by a dog, we were very impressed.
That was a red letter day on our trip. When we found out that existed, and that not only did it exist, but the guy was like, yeah, it's right up the road. Go take a left. And it's right there. And we went and it was still there in all its glory. It was great. Yeah.
So it was owned by Miss Dynamite. And the basics of it are this guy literally had his dog own a shopping center. The dog would sign the checks, which is weird. I don't think that's something you hear a lot. The dog would paw the checks. I also like that the dog, they bragged there was a stone. So they buried the dog underneath the sign at the strip mall.
Yeah. And listen, this strip mall is as strip mall as it gets.
Yeah.
Right?
It had a vape store.
Yeah.
It had a cash checking place. Like, it wasn't a classy place for your dog to have owned.
No.
And they buried the dog. And what I liked about it was clear it was important to the guy who owned it to say that the dog was high class. She said, Miss Dynamite only stayed at the best hotels and was never refused admittance through signs that said no pets allowed. So the owner really wanted you to know it was a hoity-toity dog that owned this vape store.
And also some sort of weird, bizarro civil rights like thing that he was trying to do with his dog, right? Like,
he was trying to say animals should have the same rights as
It's really weird.
Part of his thing. I don't think we made that clear in the book, that he thought he was sort of like standing up for dogs should have ownership of property.
I also love that she had received mail from Lyndon Johnson and John Glenn. Do you think Lyndon Johnson was like, take a note. I gotta, he's reading the newspaper and it just folds down. He's like, I'm gonna write that dog a letter.
If you're Lyndon Johnson and you're president and they're like, Mr. President, I need you to dictate a letter to this dog, I would have just looked at him like, I need you to get out of here. All right.
Can you imagine if Twitter got all of the fact that Trump spent half of his day writing letters
to a
dog?
Trump writes dogs. Oh, that first of all, I am confident that's happened. I'm confident. He used Allen County to talk about Dollar General because that's where it started.
Mm-hmm.
I was anti-Dollar General before this trip, but I became much more anti.
Mm-hmm.
I used to be anti because I thought it was kind of dirty. I became anti because it's interesting. They are everywhere. I mean, they're everywhere, like especially in rural places. And they are in rural places out in the middle of nowhere. So like, I'm sure there's one in Hopkinsville, but where it really is out in the county, in Christian County, in these small towns.
Mm-hmm.
And on the one hand, people will say, well, it's good because it brings goods closer to where I live. And I understand that. But as we learned, and there's a podcast that's awesome about this. I don't remember the name of it, but I've listened to it. Basically, Dollar Generals basically bleed counties dry by ruining all mom and pop shops. But unlike Walmart and some of those places that have benefits to the community, secondary benefits, Dollar General really has no secondary benefits to the community, and it just bleeds them dry. And we wrote about that here.
It's also very funny that here in Allen County, their Dollar General is, if I'm correct, this is the place that kind of looks like an old storefront, right? Downtown, is that correct?
Yes.
And then, yeah, it actually looks kind of charming, and it does not look like any other Dollar General. All of the
because we like metal, and they're out. They all look the same.
Yeah, we made this. We talked about this a lot on this trip about how everyone looked the same. And you pass one on Route 34, and it's got pool toys out front. And guess what? The one 9 miles down the road, same exact building, same pool toys out front. Like it's so homogenized. And here's where we went to the giant shipping facility too, right?
Yeah, although it didn't look like much was going on there.
No, it didn't.
I think they've moved. It all started in Allen County, and they've basically moved it all to Nashville now. So Simpson County, we went to a jail, saw Eric Vaughn, who was the head of the detention center there. And probably the big thing we learned there is the idea that the way to stop crime is to do two things. One, and this isn't a crazy theory, while they're in jail, teach them to do something else. And you're seeing that more, but they had a real successful program in Simpson County. And then number two, actually treat them as human beings. Mm-hmm. And that was the part that was most interesting to me. I mean, there's a lot of places that do job training and some of the same things they do, although I think they do it maybe better than a lot of those places. But I was really impressed that like he doesn't call the people there prisoners. He doesn't call them inmates. He calls them residents. And his idea is if I treat them with respect, they will treat me with respect. And then they actually will want to please us by having success outside of here. And it seems like that it has worked, actually.
This was one of my favorite stories, like just kind of feel good stories in this book, because when we met with them, I mean, Eric Vaughn he's kind of an intimidating guy. He kind of is a Toby Keith, a little bit kind of character.
I would not say this to be rude, but I think it's fair to say you would not look at him and say you thought he was progressive about anything. I mean, he looks like a country dude with a dip in his mouth. And the idea that he would have like this new way of looking at prisoners, you wouldn't think that when you met.
Right. And then you get to talk to him, and kind of after you see that sort of veneer drop away, what a great guy this guy was. He was so fun to talk to. He was so engaging. We spent a long time there.
Yeah, we did.
And it was very clear that it wasn't just some sort of, we're trying this thing. This was a thing that all of those people involved in that program believe very heavily in and are very, very proud of. And it's working. Like, it's crazy. It's working.
One of the most interesting things he said to me, and it's something I've taken away from this to actually apply to other things. he was talking about prison reform. I think I asked him, what do you think about
Yeah.
prison reform? And he just sort of snarled at the whole idea. And he was like, it's not that I'm against it. He said, I just hear all of these people talking about prison reform and none of them have ever been to a prison.
Mm-hmm.
And that was fascinating. He was like, Mitch McConnell, Rand Paul, Chuck Schumer. He was like, Mitch, he's like, I wish they would just come here and see what it's like. He goes, I hear them talk about it and they say things that have no relation to what it is actually like in a jail or what it's actually like in a prison. And he said, all of these people are making laws about things they do not know. And it occurred to me, that's true about like a million things. I mean, it is the case that we elect these people. They don't really know. I would say of the people in the US Senate, for instance, I would say 65 of the 100 were lawyers. So they know law, but yet they make laws about all of these different businesses that they probably know nothing about. And ultimately what they end up doing is they just defer to the biggest corporate interests and let them make the laws. But it was fascinating in the realm of prisons to hear him say, look, I keep hearing all this stuff about criminal justice reform, but none of these people know what they're talking about.
Right. There was such a humanism to what was going on there. If you remember, they brought in a prisoner. They actually brought in a prisoner, and the interaction was great. I mean, he came in and he was like, yeah, I can stop here for a second, but I got to go. I got a big thing going on at work today. And Vaughn and those guys were like, yeah, we know Danny. We know Danny, but we'll get you out of here. We just got to ask you for, I mean, they did not, I think it was the first time I'd ever seen a jailer interact with a prisoner outside of a movie,
outside of the Dukes of Hazzard with Boss Hogg. That was
right. And it was so personable and real. And it was very clear that Eric puts his money where his mouth is. I mean, like he treated this guy like, he didn't treat him like a prisoner. Like he was like, hey, good for you. You know, how's work going? Everything. I mean, it was really cool, and getting no press, which you should.
We went to Russell and Greene counties, and we used this to talk about Fruit of the Loom and NAFTA. And you know, I'm familiar with Russell County and Greene County because, as we'll talk about in a little while, I'd spent time in that area. But I don't think people, unless you grew up in a place where the entire town's economy was centered around one business, I think it's hard to sort of estimate what that means. And in Greene, Taylor, and Russell counties, Fruit of the Loom was the entire economy in many ways. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think we heard in one county, it may have been Taylor County, but in one of the counties, they said that basically the entire, when the Fruit of the Loom plant would shut down 2 weeks a year, Christmas, and then a week in the spring for like spring break. And the entire town would just shut down then too. All the restaurants and everything, because they were like, well, we know everyone's on vacation. So the entire county would just collectively take a break whenever Fruit of the Loom set their calendar for when things were off. And what was fascinating is there was a time in America where you could work at a factory like Fruit of the Loom and make a really decent middle-class wage. I think I saw that in today's dollars, what they were paid in the 60s and 70s at this place would have been like in today's dollars, like $60,000. I mean, imagine if you could work working a sewing machine and make $60,000 now. That just doesn't happen.
People were very happy there too.
And they were very happy. I mean, and basically NAFTA shut all that stuff down. And I was aware of NAFTA and I was aware of its effect on blue collar labor. But what I wasn't aware of until this trip was how Mitch McConnell, working oddly enough with Bill Clinton, was the main advocate of NAFTA. And in Kentucky, Wendell Ford, a Democrat, working with Hal Rogers, a Republican, were very much against it. And Mitch McConnell and Bill Clinton, not exactly people you'd think would be together, helped get through a bill that basically decimated the blue collar economy in Kentucky and all over the United States. But what I didn't realize was how the opposition was bipartisan as well. And I thought, Chris, what I realized is politicians who had a connection to their working class citizens, which Wendell Ford did, which Hal Rogers still does, were against it. Whereas politicians like McConnell, who never really deal with the citizens, were for it.
That's a really interesting point. I hadn't really thought of it like that, but you're exactly right. Like, because Hal Rogers is a guy who's boots on the ground. You know, Wendell Ford was boots on the ground. Mitch McConnell's not boots on the ground, so he doesn't have a stake in those people.
I bet you Mitch McConnell does not know one human being that works in a factory. Not one. I bet you I bet you he never do you think he ever interacts with someone that works in a factory? Ever? No. But I'm sure Hal Rogers does. You can't live in Somerset and not know somebody that works 9 to 5. I mean, you can't.
We met too many people who knew Hal Rogers personally that can't be true. I mean, the sad story I remember from this was in Greene County. We talked to some people who told me the story of how people were handpicked to take these special trips to like the Honduras, right? Where they would share their knowledge of the work with the people there under the guise of, hey, we're teaching people in like this exchange program. And all they were doing was they were getting hoodwinked. They were sending these people over there to train the people to do their jobs.
They were training their replacements. Yeah. And they didn't realize till it was too late.
Yeah, it's so cruel sounding. Do you remember with it, backstory from Russell County? This was where we sat down with a room full of very angry men. Do you remember that?
That was the angry white guy meeting. So we asked people in some of these places to get together, locals, and a woman there got us together, a group of people from Russell County. They were all old white men, every one of them. And they all sat there and they turned it into like 2 hours bitching about everything that's wrong with America. And it was almost like, I felt like I was watching Fox News. It was just in the room with me.
You were living it. Yeah, because we went in and we kind of, we would say, tell us what the issues are. Like, tell us what people care about here. And like, there'd be some guy in the corner and he'd be like, his arms folded. He'd be like, well, they're selling some plots of land down by the lake. And like, he would be really upset about it. It'd be like, yeah, we're not going to write about that. Like, that's not what we're, but like everybody
had upset about the plots of land down by the lake, though. I said, listen, I think that would be a good book. It's probably just not this book. We're probably not going to do plots down by the lake this point. All right. So then we went to Marion County to talk about hemp. And I would say this was probably one of the best characters we met on the entire trip. Mm-hmm. Craig Lee. So Jim Higdon, who's a buddy of mine, he wrote Cornbread Mafia. And he said to me, I called him and I was like, listen, we want to write about hemp. Who should we talk to? And he goes, well, there's only one person to talk to besides me. And I wasn't going to talk to Jim because I talked to him enough. And he was like, Craig Lee. And he was like, now listen, he's a character. And I said, well, that's perfect. And he was much more of a character than I realized. I mean, he's one of these people that like when you get out of your car, he's talking. And when you get back in your car, he's still talking. And he hasn't necessarily taken a breath the entire time you were there.
I love this guy. He's one of these guys that says things and he'll grab your shoulder. Like, that is a hilarious joke, right? You know, like he's such a big laugher, and he was talking. It was cold when we were there, wasn't it? I remember it being
a little cold.
Yeah, we were standing outside, and he was talking a mile a minute. And at one point, we actually had to stop him and say, "Listen, Craig, this is a lot of information. Can you boil this down for us?" Because he was giving us so much information. Do you remember that? And we were just like, "Stop. We're not getting some of this lingo. So like, help us understand this lingo," because he was such a character.
Yeah, he was, we wanted to talk to him about hemp because I think Kentucky's been sold a bag of goods on hemp. Now, I still think hemp can work, but it's kind of been sold as a lifesaver. And I think Mitch McConnell has been a big part of that. I mean, so for 20 years, Mitch McConnell was against hemp. And it was because he was for the tobacco industry. The tobacco industry was against hemp for a variety of reasons. So he was against hemp. So even though 20 years ago, it would have been nice for hemp to be legal back when Woody Harrelson came to our college campus and did a speech at Trancey. Were you there at that point?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that was
I
a
was
big
there. I was actually at that
I
speech.
was at the
Yeah.
speech too. I mean, Woody Harrelson's across the street.
Yeah.
You're not gonna go see him. And then he, I think he hooked up with this girl at our school,
I
but
think he did. Yeah.
he stayed in the dorm.
Yeah.
One of my friends tell me the next morning they woke up and they're like, "You're Woody Harrelson, and you're in this dorm." That's weird.
He was boots on the ground as well there.
But like, had he done it 20 years ago, Kentucky could have been the nation's leader. Well, he decided a couple of years ago to get behind hemp. They passed the hemp bill. Anytime, and I'm sure when he runs this fall, he's going to take all the credit in the world for the hemp bill and say, you know, hemp is because of me. But what we've learned is it doesn't really work for farmers. They set the bill up in a way to help big corporations. And in the process, farmers got left behind. And now what's happened, because it's not working for the farmers, they're not growing it. So the corporations are failing because they're not getting the product. So they really set up a bill that basically ensured that the industry can't work. And as Craig Lee said, they need to start over. And when we got there, if you'll remember, Chris, the state had just been to Craig's house and burned his entire hemp crop for having too much THC. So I guess it had, you know, that much more than you're allowed, and they burned it. Even though it wasn't potent enough to be marijuana, it was burned. And basically, you know, he had kind of done hemp as a hobby. It wasn't his serious business, but his whole year was gone because they just burned it and it was gone. And that has happened. I've had many other hemp farmers tell me the same thing happened to them, and their entire year productivity is gone.
Yeah, and Craig kind of painted it as if you don't know if it's going to be burned or not when they show up until they get there. Like, you could have wasted a lot of time, right? So, you know, it's crazy how many farmers we talked to. First of all, it's crazy how many farmers we talked to on this trip. But second of all, it's crazy how many we asked about hemp and how many said, I don't know, we might as well give it a try. I'm trying. We talked about the farm we visited in Todd County. Yeah. If you remember, you know, they had a whole patch of hemp, and we were like, do you believe in it? And they're like, no, not really. But if it takes off, we want to at least be in on it.
I have not spoken to one farmer who it's worked for. Not one.
I agree.
And I think a bunch of them tried it because they were hoping it would work. I think you're going to see when the next crop comes around in 2021, I don't think anybody's going to do it.
Yeah.
I mean, Gincana was one of my advertisers. I think a company that on paper looked like it was guaranteed success. They basically created these companies that would be middlemen between the farmer and the companies that sell hemp products. And so, like, they were set up for perfection, and they failed. They went bankrupt. And by the way, like, all of the biggest states' Republican politicians were investors. So, like, it should have worked, and it didn't. And I think that says it's not a good sign for hemp going forward.
You know who's doing a great job in the state of Kentucky, though? People who sell CBD oil to gas stations. Because it was everywhere. Libraries, restaurants.
All this CBD oil. I do not know one person that consistently buys CBD oil. And yet I see CBD oil stores everywhere.
Everywhere. I mean,
do you know anybody that consistently takes CBD oil?
No, I don't. But if you're like, every store we passed, even if it was a CBD oil store, it was a regular store with a sign they had just put in the window that said, we sell CBD oil.
The other thing I like about CBD oil is you ask them, so what does it do? And it does everything. It's like miracle salve from the Andy Griffith Show. Well, it'll help you sleep, but it'll also help you wake up. Well, how does that work?
Yeah.
You know,
it'll help your arms stop hurting.
It'll tighten you up. Like, it's like whatever ails you, just put some CBD oil on it and it'll be fine.
Yeah.
All right, we'll skip over Edmonson County except for one thing. This was the place where my tracker showed up and said, I need a favor. Now, over the course of this time, the tracker and I, we'd been friendly. Chris and I had been friendly. But the tracker basically said to me, look, Matt, they're asking me to get more video of you. I mean, a big reason he was supposed to be there was to get me on video. And I think we talked about this on one of the other shows. But the reason he wanted me on video is since I'm not someone who has been in the news a lot outside of the broad. So like I was on Hey Kentucky and all that, but they don't have access for commercials to my Hey Kentucky stuff unless it's news. So they can't get what's called B-roll. And because I'm not someone who news reports film a lot, there's just not a lot of camera footage of me walking around or whatever. So they need footage just of me so that they can put it on screen and then go, Matt Jones is a dirty liberal, boom, boom, boom. And they need footage. And they were like, look, dude, we need footage from you. And he said, I just don't feel comfortable taping you a lot when you don't know. But they need me to come and ask you questions. So can we set up a shoot where you act like you don't know I'm going to do it, but I'm going to run up to you and ask you questions about the wall and about abortion. And I was like, well, I don't really want to do that. And he was like, I got to do it. I think they'll fire me if we don't. So I was like, all right, fine. We'll do it tomorrow. So he comes, Chris, to the radio studio in Lexington, and he waits till I get off the show. And I mean, this is why if we ever make a movie out of this book, this scene's going to be in it. He comes and he's like, all right, you walk out the door. I'll come running to you. I'll ask you all these questions and you can just ignore them and get in your car. I was like, all right. Ryan's going to be walking with me. We get outside and he comes running and he goes, Matt Jones, do you favor Nancy Pelosi's abortion bill? And I just start laughing at how ridiculous this entire circumstance is. And we ended up filming it like 3 or 4 times.
I was there that day. Yeah.
Oh, I didn't realize you were there.
I was inside watching out the window. Yeah.
That's right. You were there.
Yeah.
So we end up doing it 3 or 4 times. And he gets his footage. I offered to take him to lunch. He's like, no, I got to go back to work. And until this book, I bet the McConnell people never knew that footage was rigged.
Do you think they think he did a good job tracking us? After all these stories have come out. Where we're just
I don't think so, no.
No, I bet they are like, that guy was a really bad tracker.
Look, when I talked to him about telling the story, I was like, look, man, I mean, I'd like to tell it. And he said yes. And he was like, it's okay. He's like, I'm not going to be doing that anymore.
Yeah.
So I said, okay.
But he didn't seem particularly interested in politics, right?
Yeah, I think he was interested in politics. But I think he wasn't I think he was interested in like macro politics, like what bills should be passed and that kind of thing. I don't think he was interested in how do you win an election and what are the dirty parts of winning an election. Mm-hmm. And I think what he realized is I think he thought he was going to work for this intellectual Republican and he'd be working on conservative political thoughts. And instead he's chasing me around restaurants across Western Kentucky. And he was like, this is not what I wanted to do.
Yeah. I felt worse and worse for him as this thing went on, because I just felt like he doesn't want it. Cause you'd be doing the show and I'd be sitting there talking to him. And I tell you, I would go in, and if there were 3 tables, he was sitting on, I'd sit down with him. And I mean,
buddies.
Yeah, I mean, we just sit there. I'd be like, yeah, how was your drive in? Just like I would talk to anybody. And I mean, he felt so weary of doing it. And I just, his heart clearly wasn't in it.
No. Would have been fascinating if I ran what all this happens now. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I think he would have still quit. But what happens when I tell these stories now if I had ran?
Yeah. I don't know. What do you
could they have used all this when they know it was all fake?
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know what would have happened.
It would have been interesting to see what his next role would have been if that had happened.
Well, he was going to quit either way, I think.
He was, you think?
Well, we'll talk about that more when we get to the book. Metcalfe County, we went to a gun guy. This is the home of Stevie Romines. And I called Romines. I'm like, look, we're looking for somebody who's really into guns in Metcalfe County. And Romines goes, just knock on any door.
Yeah. We found this fellow who ran it was kind of like it was like a tiny gun range. Dude was super nice. One of the more friendly people we met on our entire trip. Not afraid at all to talk about how he felt about guns. Very pro-Trump, very anti-Mitch.
Yeah, that was weird. Very pro-Trump.
Yeah.
Very anti-Mitch. And I don't think people realize how many of those people are out there. Now, I don't think Amy McGrath's the person to win those people over, but there are people like that to be won over. And this guy was a perfect example. This dude owns a gun range and a gun store. And he's just like, yeah, I don't like Mitch. And I was like, where you were like, would you vote for Democrat? Well, maybe, probably not, but maybe.
Yeah. He was an independent. He was a registered independent.
Yeah.
And so he hadn't ruled it out, but I mean, he just was like, but make no mistake about it. He loved Trump. Like thought
just
he
so
was.
Because Trump's never fired a gun in his life.
Right. Like that's what I was saying. And I thought, I think maybe we even asked him at some point, why do you like him so much? Like, what's his deal with guns? And his point is, it had nothing to do with guns. It was that Donald Trump was taking us away from a surefire apocalypse. Like he was delivering us to the next plane of human existence,
which is a pandemic.
It was crazy. Yeah.
It's interesting. I tweeted about this the other day. The amount of and this dude was one of these, the amount of country tough dudes who think Donald Trump is one of them is baffling to me.
Yeah.
Because Donald Trump would not walk across the street to talk to these people. Do you think at any point in his life, Donald Trump has ever been in a place like that gun range in Metcalfe County?
No, but these country tough dudes, though, you got to also remember that they also have this thing. Country tough dudes also like to tell you that they will tell you exactly how it is, and that they will.
And I get that's why they like him. But my point is just to say, if Donald Trump was not the president of the United States, they would hate a dude like Donald Trump.
Oh yeah, if I just went in there and said, "What do you think of the guy who hosts The Apprentice?" Is like
they said, "Oh, he's a jerk.
Yeah,
he's a rich snob." Like if Donald Trump was Donald Trump in any scenario except being president, they would hate him.
That's a great point.
Yeah. But since he's been a politician, it's complete. Like a New Yorker who thought he was better than everybody else, who wore suits all the time. Like they would hate that guy.
Dated pageant models,
But they would hate that guy. And then it's just fascinating to watch how. But this dude liked him. But I'll also say this: guys like that are really looked down upon by folks on our side of the aisle. They just are. I mean, like that, when you say Trump conservative, people think of that guy. That dude was extremely nice, wasn't he?
He was great. There was nothing about.
And how kind was he to us? People that he knew didn't think like him. He was extremely kind, taught you all how to shoot.
Yeah.
Right? Like that's what gets me about a lot of liberal folks. They want to demonize everybody. Look, some of these people that are Trump supporters are jerks, but some of the people that are Biden supporters are jerks too. That dude was really nice. And I think most people would write him off as some sort of racist, awful, and that wasn't the case. He was a really nice guy who couldn't have been nicer to us. And I knew that before. I grew up around people like that. But I wish a lot of folks that say such awful things about Trump supporters would go meet a guy like that. I think they'd be surprised, Chris, that they like them.
Yeah, and I think they'd be surprised at how willing some of these people are to listen to them, because I think that there's a perception that I can't even talk to this guy. He's not going to listen to me. I don't think that's not true. I mean, this guy was, he liked talking about his family. He drew the line at, he said, I can't unfortunately police what happens to these guns when they leave the store? I mean, he was very honest and forthcoming about it, so, but I agree. That's a very interesting conversation that many progressives should have, I think.
All right, the next 2 counties is where we talked about abortion. And if you listen to the radio show, I say sometimes, Chris, if there's one topic you will never hear me discuss ever, it's abortion, because it's just not something that I think I can add anything to the debate that's helpful. I decided, though, you couldn't write a book about Kentucky and about why Mitch McConnell is successful without dealing with abortion, because abortion probably drives more votes in Kentucky than any other topic. It is, for some people, a line in the sand that they cannot cross. There are people who I love, like people who literally I love, who have said to me, Matt, I love you. If you run and you win, I'll be happy, but I can't vote for you because you're pro-choice. I just can't. And I get that. I understand. I don't want to debate abortion on this. I was very careful to what we wrote in this section, because I wanted to articulate my thoughts as best I could. And basically my thoughts were, look, personally, on a moral level, I don't really know what I think. I kind of go back and forth. But on a politics level, I think the choice should be between a woman, her doctor, and God. And they don't need my opinion. So that's why I'm pro-choice. And I've actually, Chris, had a guy I grew up with send me a message and say something like, I'm really glad you wrote that, because that articulates my position. And I never really have ever heard anybody say it like that. But what I really wanted to articulate, though, was the end when I said the Matt Jones baby killer line. Because what I wanted to say was, it was going to hurt me to have people talk about how I want to kill babies if I'm pro-choice. And I knew that would happen. And our editor, was like, Matt, you should take out that line, Matt Jones baby killer. Why do you want to put that? You don't deserve that. And I was like, well, no, I don't deserve it, but that is what people would say. And he was like, well, why do you want to put that in there? Why are you saying it for them? I was like, because that's what they're going to say.
Yeah.
And so I kept it in, even though he didn't think I should. What did you think about this section?
I think that I agree. We had a lot of talks about how careful this tightrope needed to be walked. And I think that at the end of the day, we were not ever interested in denigrating another person's point of view. But what we did want to do was, I think, show how, just like everybody else, pro-life people are also a pawn of Mitch McConnell.
Yeah,
like they're a move. They're a chess move for him. And
yeah, so I do not think pro-life is something he cares about at all.
No, and I think that's why we had to. Yeah, that's why we had to put this section in. Not to say, look, this is how I feel. This is how you feel. I don't agree with you. Like, take that out of it. It had to do with the fact that McConnell rides the backs of these people, and they think he's got their best interest in mind. And there are many people, we said this in the first book club. There are people who vote for him just because of this. That's all.
And I firmly believe this, and I'll drop it at this. Gabe's wondering why I didn't talk about all the fights I've gotten in on golf courses. That would have been a better topic, to be honest with you. But I'll leave it at this, and I firmly believe this. I think the abortion debate in this country is exactly where Mitch McConnell wants it. He does not want the Supreme Court to reverse Roe versus Wade. He does not. Because he knows if that happens, the swing states will all go Democrat, because more people are pro-choice than pro-life in those states. And he knows if Roe versus Wade were to get reversed, that women in the country, it would be bad for Republicans. He does, however, want to use it as a political issue. So what it is right now is perfect. He promises that they're going to reverse it. He never does. And then he blames the liberals when he doesn't. It's perfect. And this is what I always say, if they wanted to reverse it, Chris, they could. They have 5 conservatives on the court: Roberts, Kavanaugh, Alito, Gorsuch, and Thomas. They have 5. They've had 5 conservatives for 40 years. They've never reversed it. I don't think Roberts would vote to reverse it. I don't think Kavanaugh would vote to reverse it. I do think the other three would. So I don't think they'll even take a case bringing it up because they don't want to reverse it. And that's how Mitch McConnell wants it. And that's why for the people that are very sincere pro-life, and there are many of them, and I respect it, Mitch McConnell's playing those people because he says he cares and he doesn't care. Because if he did, he could have had people appointed that would have reversed it.
And it's just another instance, of Mitch McConnell using people to get to his own ends.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right, we go to Cumberland County, which had the Alpine Wotel.
Yeah.
This is the turkey hunters line. The Alpine Wotel. It was a little bit racist.
Yeah, a little bit.
So the sign said, when you drive up to the Alpine Wotel, it says, "Caution, this resort is politically incorrect. We say Merry Christmas, respect our men in blue, honor our veterans, God bless America, free speech forever, profiling makes sense."
Yeah.
That was the one that when you see it, you go, "Ooh."
It's a little loaded. Yeah.
So we walk in this office, this old couple, they seem very sweet. And like, you made fun of me, you and Eli, because you were like, Matt was trying to like convince them to change their views.
Yeah.
I was like, you all don't really want to write that, do you? Like profiling, that like people may be offended by that. You don't want that. And they were like, yeah, we do.
Yeah. This is one of those situations, and we've known each other a long time. And I've seen situations where you get into a conversation and it's like you're slowly ratcheting it up. And I'm like, where is this going to end? Like, I know where this started. I don't know where this is going to end. Is this going to end with us running down this hill, being shot at? Is it going to, but I could see that these guys, they were not changing their mind.
I genuinely thought if I reason with them, they're going to take that profiling thing off. Because they seem like sweet people. All I need to do is reason with them. And then they were basically like, no, I'm not going to be reasoning.
What did you think they could, that liberal stranger had a really good point.
I thought they might say, maybe they would say, we don't agree with him, but we'll try not to offend people.
But he found his own crazy loophole for it. He said that the profiling was against drunk people or something like that, didn't he?
Because that's a phrase we use a lot in America, drunk profiling.
Are you drunk? You cannot shop in this store if you're drunk.
I don't think drunk profiling is a thing. I think he sort of made that up. I don't think that's a thing. By the way, we're going to run long here, but we've got a bunch of stuff still to get to. So I'm sorry, we're probably going to go 15 or 20 minutes long. I hope that's all right. You don't have anywhere to be, do you, Chris?
Nope.
This is where we talk to David Williams. And I'd like actually to talk longer about David, but since we're running behind, I won't. But he was the former head of the Kentucky State Senate. And he was a Republican. And what I wanted to show here, Chris, was that David Williams was basically Mitch McConnell, but in Kentucky. And David Williams was fascinating in how he talked about how empty his life was. He basically said that when he was head of the Kentucky State Senate, he almost wasn't a human being. He was just a politician, and people only looked at him as a politician. And he was obsessed with being a politician. And his marriage fell apart. His friendships fell apart. And he basically realized that he wasn't being a full human. And he had enough foresight to see that. For people that don't know, he got Governor Beshear, who was his kind of political enemy, to appoint him as a judge. I mean, think about that for a minute. That would be like Barack Obama appointing Mitch McConnell as a judge. That's basically what Beshear did. But now that David Williams that now lives in his hometown and is a judge is a completely different person, and he would say a better person than the one who was a senator. And I just found that fascinating, Chris.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about this on the trip about, it's very interesting because he's a very good example of what politics can do to a person. Changes their priorities. It changes what you think is important. It changes how your interpersonal relationships work, because so much of politics is about trying to get other people to do what you want them to do, right? So you basically have to almost become a sociopath. It's very interesting. It's very cool that he had this. I mean, this is the only story I can think of that where somebody had this kind of change of heart. This is almost like a movie, right? It really
is like a movie. And he would tell you, David Williams' reputation when he was a state senator in Kentucky was that he was an asshole. Mm-hmm. Like if you asked anyone, Democrat or Republican, tell me something about David Williams, they'd have said two things. He's smart and he's an asshole. That's what they would have said. Mm-hmm. And he basically was like, that's not what I wanted to be. And so now he's into church and a lot else. But he also, what was interesting is he's not 100% happy. He misses it sometimes. And he said that, I miss it. He was like, I miss that people would return my calls. Like there's a whole different thing. But when I looked at him, here's what I thought. I thought, if I run, will I be giving up what it means to be Matt Jones? I mean, my entire life, this is true, has been about, I have the same friends basically I've had my entire since college. You guys, the 10 people that were my best friends in college, 8 of them are still my best friends now. And I've added hubby and Drew Franklin. Like that's about it. Will I be giving all of that up? Will I lose my relationships with my girlfriend, with my friends? Will I lose my relationship with the state, the kind of connection I have to people? And David Williams was an example of that. And I was thinking like, what if you're just a completely different person on the other side of this? What was the point of doing it?
Yeah. I mean, to make an incredibly kind of nerdy comparison, it's very much like that Star Wars thing is if you use the Force for evil, you start to rot inside.
But that's a good comparison.
Yeah. But I mean, that's kind of how it felt. And kudos to him for speaking to us about it, because, I don't think that he really was sold on talking to us about it, because that's not like something he uses now as a lesson to teach people. It's something he has internalized on his own, and he was really kind to share it with us.
What I really respect about him is how honest he is in these conversations. You don't see a lot of people, especially politicians, that are this introspective about their personality and their strengths and their weaknesses. And he was, and I really like that. We go to Clinton County. For people so here's how we ended up in Clinton County. We're driving down the road, and I said to Chris, sorry, it's about to fall. I said to Chris, we saw this like side of the road house on the side of the road that basically had a house and a junkyard. And I was like, let's just stop there. And we stopped, and these two men walked out, and I can't describe the two men except to say they were in Clinton County, but they could have been in the hollers of Bell County. And they look like mountain folks, even though Clinton County is not all that mountain. That's what they look like. Nice guys, rascals. The one dude said he'd been arrested how many times, Chris? He said
34, wasn't it? Is that what it was?
34 times. And the thing was, he acted like it wasn't crazy.
Yeah.
Like if I'd been arrested 34 times, I'd be like, Chris, I've been arrested 34 times.
Yeah, listen, there's something you need to know about me before we continue this relationship.
And he's just like, yeah, he said something like, I've been to jail. And I was like, really? A lot? He's like, yeah, 34 times.
And the funny thing was, and we talked about this afterwards, is he said that, and then he was like, not drugs though. So it's like, okay, I could see getting arrested 34 times for drugs. Right? But if you're arrested,
it was drugs.
But 34 times without drugs involved, that means you're just running around punching people, like getting in bar fights, throwing a chair through the window at the A&P. I mean, like it's, I would love to know some of the things I would love to see his rap sheet.
He was not introspective about it at all. It was just like, This is just what happens. Sometimes you get arrested 34 times. I think the takeaway from this section was something that I believe is definitely true in Kentucky, which is, I think a recent development, but I think for a lot of men in Kentucky, especially rural country men, the idea of being a Republican is being a man. and that by being a Democrat, you're almost wimpy. Being a Democrat is almost feminine in some ways. That there's this idea that, like, look, I'm a man. Like, when I suggested to him, are you a Democrat? He looked at me like I asked him if he was a elephant. I mean, he was basically like, no. Like, and when we started talking about issues, he was a Democrat on many issues. He was pro-government healthcare, like he was pro all this stuff. But at the end of the day, being a Democrat to him was being wimpy. And when I said that I was a Democrat, I don't know if you remember this, he goes, really? Like he could, like,
you look like a man to me.
He couldn't fathom that somebody that sounded like me was a Democrat. He was like, really?
Yeah.
So I honestly think that mindset, though, is very prevalent. This idea that, like, Democrats, like, that's not what it means to be a man.
Yeah, and I say this without misogyny, but like, I think that only helped cement itself in when Hillary was the option. Because it was like, are you with the men or are you with the ladies? You know, and these guys are like, well, I know which side I'm on. I'm with the men.
But I don't mean men, by the way, like men versus women. I mean man, like you're a man.
Right.
Like, but tough things. And like being a Republican's being tough. I think guns are a big part of that. If you have guns, you're a man, you go shooting and stuff like that. And Democrats want to take it away because they're not really manly men.
Yeah. If you're a Democrat, you probably don't know how to shoot. You probably don't know how to hunt. You don't know how to do. Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
That's why people say to me, how can you be from Bell County if you don't know how to do this and that? And I'm always like, well, I do like wrestling and NASCAR. That should count for something. But anyway. All right, last two.
Well, wait. We can't get out of this without talking about the bizarre church encounter we had in Clinton County.
That's right. Okay, good. Yeah. Very good call. So Clinton County has more churches per capita than any county in America. And because of that, we wanted to go to one so that I could use that stat. So somebody, I won't say who, but we asked somebody and they were like, this is a church you need to go to. It's the best church in Clinton County. And we went, and the dudes couldn't have been ruder. Like there was like a gym / fellowship hall, and they were like getting ready for on Thanksgiving, they were going to like give away turkeys and stuff. And they were getting ready for it. And it was a Sunday afternoon, and we were looking for where can we go to church on Sunday night. And we walked in, and those two men could not have been less welcoming.
Yeah, it should be noted that when we rolled up, we noticed this is the church where all the nice SUVs are parked, right? So this is where,
the church in Clinton County where probably the elite Christians go, the Christians who probably are the county judge executive and and they were very rude. And when I was like, hey, here's what it looked like. They thought we were a bunch of city folk that they didn't trust, that were trying to stir something up. And when I tried to say, hey, we just want to see what church is like here, they were basically like, don't come. This is not for you, which was the exact opposite of what a church should be. And this is really true. We went to 120 counties all over the state. The only place we went where I did not feel welcome was this church in Clinton County.
That's really ironic and 100% true. It was the only place where we felt like they wanted us to leave.
Yeah, I mean, I met with Republican politicians. I met with people, who have the diametric opposite views. I met with Louisville fans who hated me, and I never at any point felt unwelcome except in this church.
Yeah, and to top it off, at some point their plan changed, and then they wanted us to come because they're like, you know what, you should come back tonight. There's some people you should meet here, and everything like that.
I think they were just being asses.
But I kind of felt like they were like, oh man, we're definitely not coming back now, because like if you guys are treating us like this, and there's somebody who's going to give us a harder time, we ain't coming back.
Yeah. Now the counter to that was in the next county, in Adair County. So we didn't get a church in Clinton County. So we decided, we were driving through Adair County. just trying to find a church. And we passed 3 or 4 of them that didn't have Sunday night services. And we basically decided the first church we come upon that's open, we're going. And we just went to one. And I'll tell you something interesting about it. I have had, Chris, since this book came out, probably Calvary Temple Church was the name of it. Mm-hmm. Probably 7 or 8 people that go to this church write me. And I think the whole church has read this book because they were in it. And I've had 7 or 8 people say to me, thank me for how we portrayed the church. But we portrayed it that way because it was the exact opposite of what we saw in Clinton County. The 3 of us got there. It was like the service had already started. We walked in late. We sort of slipped in. A man recognized me. He was a listener of the show, and he came over and welcomed us. And we actually slipped out early, so we didn't really even get to talk to people. And yet, it was what you want. Like, they were completely kind to us. And, you know, I think we hopefully portrayed it well in the book.
Yeah, it was. This is one of those. It's kind of this chapter is sort of like the Floyd County chapter, or the Prestonsburg story of us going to the barber shop. You know, it's one of those stories where it was a tale we wanted to tell from the road. You know, and it was such an interesting, and also it's such a very, very much a slice of Kentucky life, I think. Yeah. And it was perfect. They were wonderful people there, and it was a really, really great time.
Yeah, and we also got to introduce Eli to sort of mountain preaching, because this guy got worked up, and he would he'd do the ha, and he got worked up, and we had people chanting back to him, and it was good stuff. Well, then we finished with Taylor County, and, you know, I think along with the Jason Root chapter, the Clay County chapter, this has been the chapter that people have talked to me the most about, and for understandable reasons. And so, you know, I'll just go through what made me decide to write this. You know, I had never really publicly talked about my father, really since I became a public figure. I would say some of my friends knew about the past, but many did not. Chris, I assume you probably did.
I did, yeah.
There weren't many. I mean, I would say there were probably many of my friends that did not. And I was unsure how I was going to handle that in the book. You know, my dad left when I was young. I was 5 years old, and I had a relationship with him until I was probably 11 or 12. And as I say in the book, he spent some time in prison, and he killed 2 people in a drunk driving accident. And, you know, I didn't really think about it in the context of, it's, as I write in the book, it's never really been something, it doesn't like haunt me. It's not something that I think about a lot, because he was never really a presence in my life after a young age. And my stepdad, Larry, really sort of was. And so he became like my father figure. And even though, you know, I knew my dad and was close to him when I was young, it just, for some reason, it didn't affect me in the same way, but it certainly was a part of my past. And I didn't think about it in the context of the race until a reporter called me and said, listen, Matt, we're preparing stories for If You Run. And I'm going to tell you that one of the stories is going to be about your dad. And do you want to talk about that? And honestly, Chris, until that phone call, it just didn't occur to me. Mm-hmm. It just didn't occur to me. And then it started occurring to me. And I found out some things I didn't know. I'll tell you one weird fact. I found out that one of my dad's friends was actually somebody who had a history with Mitch McConnell, just weirdly. And so, you know, I was like, well, I'm going to have to deal with that. And all of a sudden, this figure that I really didn't have a relationship with, it occurred to me, if I run, it's going to be back in my life again. And his case, his Kentucky Supreme Court case about his accident is studied at UK law school. So I knew like every lawyer in the state knows this case because they studied it when they were in school. Mm-hmm. So I decided the best way to write about it was to do it by going to Taylor County, and you went with me, and we went to my aunt's house, who is the one member of my dad's family I still keep in touch with. My grandmother's passed away. And we sat with her, and I basically said to her, I don't want to do this, but I have to. I need you to tell me where my dad is. I need you to tell me what he's doing. Because if I run, I need to know. And she did, and she talked about it. It was the first time, Chris, that I had any information about him in 15 years. And, you know, that was difficult. You were sitting there with me that day. We went back and saw the house my grandmother lived in when I would go visit when I was a kid. And that was a very emotional day. And you were there for all of it. And I decided to write about it. And it wasn't an easy decision to write about it because most listeners to KSR, most people in public have no idea that happened. But I decided this was the time. I almost talked about it when the young kid got killed outside the UK football game. You remember that last year? Mm-hmm. He got hit by a drunk driver. And I almost came on the air the next day and told the story because I thought that would be a good time. And then I didn't. I just decided not to. So this felt like the right forum. And it has been really, I think, touching to people, I hope. Drew Franklin, actually today, he just finished the book, sent me a long text message about that section saying, you know, about what he thought about it. So, you know, I didn't know how I was going to deal with it, but I decided this was the way to do it.
Yeah, I mean, it is, I mean, it's personal to write or to talk about family in words, like when you're a writer anyway. It's doubly difficult to expose yourself and lay some transparency like you did in this chapter. And I mean, I remember when I read this for the first time, and it was incredibly moving to me. And I knew the story because we had talked about it before, so I was aware of how bare you were laying yourself. And I knew that it was very difficult, and I really applauded you for that because I thought that, you know, this is something that you didn't have to do, and you did. And I'm glad you did. I think it makes your story stronger, and I think that it helps to help let people who people know you better. And I think you're right too. I think that at that point you were thinking, if this is going to happen, this needs to be addressed. Right. And so I think you addressed it as eloquently as you could, knowing how painful it was to write about. And this is to me one of my favorite, I think one of the strongest chapters in the book, you know.
I mean, the whole point of this overall chapter 9 is let's look at all the things that are going to make this tough. Abortion is going to make it tough. Guns are going to make it tough. The prevalence of church folks are going to make it tough. Even though I'm probably more religious than Mitch McConnell, it's still going to be tough. The idea that being a Republican is being a man is going to make it tough. And then to finish with, my history with my father is going to make it tough because there was no way I was going to run and this was not going to be a thing. Now, I think Mitch McConnell is smart enough that like he wouldn't have attacked me for it. I think that would have backfired. I mean, just think that I don't think that works. So I think he's a smart enough. I don't think he would have done that. But what I do think would have happened is it would have come out, and it would have been something that I had to sort of live with on a big scale. Mm-hmm. And that was, I've spent my whole life not really having to deal with him, and I'm going to have to. And people are going to expect me to speak about it. And I'm going to have to like make public pronouncements about this.
Well, he might speak about it even, right?
He might. Well, that's another thing. You know, I didn't know somebody would contact him, right? So I didn't know if I still don't know if one day he'll ever come out. I've told you this story before, but there was a period of time he lived in Louisville when I lived in Louisville. And I went to my radio station one day early on, like first or second year at KSR. And this is the craziest thing in the world, but I walked in to do the show, and sitting in the lobby, all of a sudden I just had a weird feeling. And I looked, and it was him. He was sitting in the lobby. He worked at the time for a business. He was about to go on Leland Conway's show. And I hadn't seen him since I was like 12. And I knew it was him. And I went in, and at that time, Brian the intern was the producer for Leland Conway's show. And I went, Brian, what's the name of that guy that's coming on? And he said it. And I was like, I can't believe that. And I didn't talk to him. And he was sitting in that lobby. I hadn't seen him since I was 12, and I didn't talk to him. I just went to my studio and did my show.
Do you think he recognized you?
He didn't see me. He was looking down.
Oh.
Well, I mean, I don't think he saw me.
Right.
I kind of don't think he did. But I'm sure he knew I was in that building, though. I'm sure he knew that I worked as because I'm in Louisville on the radio. Right?
Yeah, I'm sure he knew. Yeah.
Sure he knew. But that was like a whoa. And then I didn't know, honestly, Chris, I didn't know if he still lived in Louisville or not. I've always sort of wondered, am I going to run into him one day? And it turns out he's moved to another part of the country. But so anyway, it felt like this was the kind of the time to deal with that. So I just want to thank everybody who has written me about that, including I've had a number of people who have written me, and this has been really gratifying. People who, for whatever reason, don't have relationships with their father, or people who had their father, something happened, and talked about how much that meant to them. And, that's really gratifying, because, it's not your fault if your parent has some sort of background like this. And it's easy sometimes to think it is, but it's not. So anyway, not to end on a heavy note, but I guess this chapter ended on it.
Yeah, the chapter ended.
So we'll do chapter 10, hopefully Tuesday, Chris, and we'll finish it up. Hopefully Joseph Beth will get the book in the store.
Come on, Joseph Beth, get behind us.
I was so bummed when I walked in, because I was all ready to see it up, and then it wasn't there.
That's weird. I never would have thought that would have been the case.
Well, I didn't ask about it because I was worried I'd get frustrated, and I didn't want Ryan and Shannon making fun of me. So I didn't ask about it, but other people have since then, and they said that their shipment isn't in. That's hard for me to believe. The book's been out for 2 months.
But everybody else who wants a copy and ordered it has gotten it, right?
I mean, so right the other day that they bought it at a bookstore in Houston, so they got their shipment. So I feel like you could have gotten it in Lexington.
Yeah, and we even took great pains to be like, go buy local at your if you want to, go buy Joseph Beth. Like,
before the quarantine, they wanted me to do my first appearance at Barnes and Noble. And I was like, no, I want to support Joseph Beth. It's an independent bookstore. I've been going there since I was a kid. So they called and offered it to Joseph Beth, and Joseph Beth said yes. So, Joseph Beth, where's the love?
Yeah.
43 copies of a book about needlepoint. You're telling me you can't get Mitch, please?
You're the Kentucky bookstore. This is a book literally only about Kentucky.
Yeah. Come on. So hopefully that'll get fixed. We'll see. If not, I'll just, I guess, give more money to Jeff Bezos. So, Chris, thank you very much. This one went long, but I appreciate it.
Yeah, it was good. Thank you, man. We'll see you guys on Tuesday.
All right. Thanks.
All right.